arrived in Australia with $700, and I actually didn't know one person when I arrived.
Oh, wow.
My desire at that stage was always to get back into the garment industry. I decided to source out what area would be the best to enter with low finance, with low capital, and I found that the budget end was going to be the easiest part for me to enter the industry because no one really wanted to do it in those days.
Why is that?
Because it was unattractive. You know, you made garments that would retail for $7. You made garments that would retail for $9. It was very difficult to do, but it was an industry taken up by some elderly gentlemen who made a lot of money out of supplying Coles and Woolworths. And I thought I had an avenue to get in and navigate a path in the industry. Coles and Woolworths were my first customers. They gave me great opportunities to perform, to work with them.
In providing garments to Coles and Woolworths?
To their stores, yeah. My problem was I didn't have any money. So I had to work a way where, and that's one of the reasons why I chose the budget end, because I worked out that if I could get credit from my fabric suppliers for 30 days, and if I could get credit for 90 days, and if I could get credit from my sewers for 30 days, I could get, in those days, Coles and Woolworths would pay you in 7 days and take 2.5% discount. So I figured that if I was able to get Coles and to become a major supplier to Coles and Woolworths, I was going to have money coming into me in 7 days, and I only had to fulfill my opportunities at 90 days. Yeah. So I had a business that was actually self-funded, but was the support of the structures that existed in Coles and Woolworths.
And how did you think of that? Did you sit down yourself and
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely. I had to find a way. I didn't want someone to finance me. I wanted to be able to be independent. So I thought that this would be the easiest way to do it. I didn't take any advice from anybody. It was clearly sorted out between my wife and myself. The first year of business, my sewers all agreed to 30 days. My fabric suppliers agreed to 90, so I had a ready-made business. I went into a situation where my first year I turned over $8 million from a zero start. I realized that I had to be lean as possibly as I can, and I decided, not so much in 1987, more in 2008, when the next crash happened, also a stock market crash. In order to survive, I was employing about 50 people. I realized I had to shave that dramatically. So what I did was, and was one of my better moves that I made, was I decided to pick a team that will be multifaceted and pay them more in the middle of this crisis.
Pay them more in the middle of the crisis.
Increase their salary, but asking them to do 3 times what they were doing.
Yes.
To pick up. So I put together from 50, I think I put together a team of between 15 and 20 people. Paid them a lot more, gave them motivation, and unfortunately I had to dispose of a lot of people, but
yes,
it was survival.
And because really the business needs to survive in order to maintain current jobs that people can keep, as well as future jobs.
For sure.
So the business's survival is obviously priority.
And it worked. It worked. And I kept that formula all the way. Even when we were producing 11 million garments, I had like 20 people working for me. And I made a lot of them very rich as well.
Yes, and that's so important. And I love that because that means that the downturn in the economy actually had a positive effect in the future for your business. You learned.
Yeah.
You were forced to shrink the team, pay them more, give them also more ownership over the business because they're working harder. They're part of that core team. They're feeling good, and as the economy returned, then your costs were much leaner. Your team was much more devoted. They were earning a lot of money, and
we're talking about bad times now.
Yeah,
all of that happening.
Yeah, and you did that in the bad time.
We did it in bad time.
Yeah,
and I must just tell you, Danny, that I employed a lot more women than men. Just how the rat trade works.
Yes.
I would have 3 guys working on product and going out and selling. I would close the deal, but they would go out and do all the initial work. This before the government came out with things relating to pregnancies and stuff like that. All my girls all had babies at similar times. I didn't lay off any. That's before the government.
Before the regulations were there.
I paid them their salary for some of them took off, and this was amazing. They would take off 6 weeks, and they were back in the fold. So the formula worked. It was honesty and integrity and productivity. In 1988, my wife, my daughter, who was 6 at the time, and myself were travelling back from a trip. For me, it was
your daughter was your daughter with you? I didn't know
she
this.
was 6, yeah. And we were flying back from Honolulu to Sydney, and we were 20. We were on a flight from Honolulu to Sydney, and the flight boarded at about 11 o'clock at night, and the plane took off. When we were sitting in business class, in that stage there was 18 people in business class down at the bottom area of the plane, and we were sitting in row 9. 27 minutes after the plane took off from Honolulu, there was the loudest explosion. The door had blown out and put a hole of 22 foot by 40 foot. And the people sitting in business class, of the 18, 11 were blown out of the plane.
While you're sitting on the plane, there's a hole in the plane and people are being sucked out of it.
They were sucked out just at the time of the explosion. When the door blew out, it blew a hole. It took out the whole of the fuselage. I looked at it. I looked at the hole. The gentleman sitting next to my wife was blown out of the plane, and his wife was on the opposite side. So she shared an arm rest with him. So it was horrific.
Can you just...
I thought that it was the time when a lot of bombs were going off. I was sure that it was a bomb that had gone off. But what had happened was we had total vision of the engines, and 2 engines were on fire, the same side of the side of the plane, and 2 bodies had been sucked into the engines. So it was a very difficult task for the pilot to control and to try and engineer this plane to land. He believed that it would be 5 kilometers into the ocean in Pearl Harbor, and he didn't think he could land it. Why? Because he had full tanks of fuel, and to try and land a plane like that with full fuel, he couldn't dislodge any fuel because of the flames in 2 engines. So
because the fuel would cause the plane to go on fire.
Yeah. So the plane dropped from 32 foot to 11 foot almost within 10 minutes. We were absolutely convinced that we couldn't survive. It became very difficult because we could see the lights of Honolulu, and we thought this was never going to happen, and we wished that we could die rather than have this prolonged period of trying to fly back from Honolulu to get back to Honolulu. It was a horrific experience. One of the flight attendants was delivering drinks, and the drink trolley hit her in the back of the head, and she was just covered in blood. She was lying maybe right next to the hole, in fact. I got up and picked her up and put her under my legs. She was bleeding profusely, and she was in a terrible way.